Hey, and welcome back to another video. So here I am doing a remake of the first video on this series on the various kinds of yoga. The reason why I deleted the previous one is because I got a particular information incorrect, which was the story of Dhruv and Prahlad, which I do know about. I do know Hindi, I do know a bit of Sanskrit. And I appreciate the comment, by the way, the person who told me that, I got it wrong over there. And I did mention in the beginning part of the video that it's been 10 years since I've read anything on yoga, and it's been all about practice and practice and practice, It's been many years of reading these books, and, it's sort of like, over time you just lose it. And I kind of was like, well, I know enough to just do the video, so let me sit down and just be really authentic and not have a script in front of me or a book in front of me that anybody can do, that anybody can read about, these mythologies and just talk about it. That wouldn't be an authentic video. That would be just any person parroting stuff that's already there. So in that particular video, I touched upon what is Bhakti Yoga, and basically Bhakti Yoga and explaining devotion and all of these things. I'm 100% sure that I got it correct, and experience is what I'm talking from, okay? And not just reading books, which, we all have our kicks, and I guess, some people get their kick out of reading books, some people actually, do the practice, or some people do both. I apologize for going wrong over there. So I'm gonna restart with Bhakti Yoga as being a branch of that yoga which, makes use of the emotional part of our being, We call it the yoga of love, and also the yoga of devotion. You would equate devotion to karma yoga more than Bhakti Yoga. But somewhere down the line, if you've been reading about yoga and if you've been practicing it enough, you'll understand that Hatha Yoga, Kundalini Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, they all meet at the same point at the end of the day, all roads lead to Rome, sort of a thing, And it's the same with Bhakti Yoga, it's just that through the use of heightened emotions, you get to samadhi, you get into this yogic trance. That's Bhakti Yoga, basically. When, for example, a person is so in love with Krishna, for example, or like how Jesus was so in love with the Almighty Father, that the devotee's love for Krishna and Jesus's devotion to the Almighty took them beyond their egos and connected them to something much grander and much more universal than them, that they became one with it, and hence the saying, God has created us in his image, Or Krishna saying in the Bhagavad Gita that I am you and you are and you are me, So these are just different kinds of ways of saying that, it's this process of the individual soul meeting the universal soul. And therefore yoga happening, because yoga is union. Yoga is basically, when you're talking about practicing an asana, the very scattered energies are brought into one union. Okay, that's the first step in practicing an asana. So everything is about bringing these multifaceted, this multiplicity of things into one coherent union. Okay, that's yoga. In Bhakti Yoga, obviously, people don't fall in love with people. They fall in love with God, and so they sing kirtans and bhajans, and they do this in order to arouse a great sentiment, a great emotion, to the point that, as I mentioned, they go into a trance. And in that trance, they are able to, because I'm talking from experience, you're able to actually commune, be in communion with the Godhead to the point that you actually realize in this very, it's so real, the experience, you actually realize that, well, I am that. Just like in the Upanishads, just like in the Vedanta, there is the saying, I am that, you do realize that when you go into the trance, when you do the kirtan and the bhajan. It's the same in the Sufi movement, where they go and they turn around, they go into the trance, and that's why Bhakti Yoga was considered to be the easiest form of yoga, because it was practicable by the vast majority of people, because Hatha Yoga is not for everybody. Let me tell you that straight off the bat. The Hatha Yoga is an extremely difficult form of yoga. It's very physical, and so people who are very athletic, people who have got a lot of willpower, physical willpower and mental willpower, not everybody is able to do that, and it's quite risky if you do it the wrong way, It's the same with Kundalini Yoga. It's the same with Prana Yoga. And, when you're talking about Raja Yoga, again, it's difficult. Think about, take into consideration the yams and the niyams, Look at the society that we live in. So, there are going to be challenges. So, Bhakti Yoga was said to be the shortest and the fastest and the easiest way to, reach union with God, So, basically, people, had this ritualistic way of doing it, and the others just went with the heart. Some people would do things, sort of like fast for God. I will fast on this day for your sake, as a sacrifice to you, I will give this donation, this amount of money to this organization, but I'm giving it to you, Then there are the others, who are sort of like, who really push it to the next level. And they're like, I see you in you. And I love that. And I love you. And it's a universal love, which is the pinnacle of Bhakti Yoga. And these kind of people end up becoming very sattvic. Sattvic, as I explained it in my previous videos, is, the element of, it's the property of being white, the property of goodness. So I'm not going to get into the details again. Just take a look at the videos, and, Sattva guna, okay, which is the quality of goodness, is exceptionally heightened in people who, are very advanced bhakti yogis, okay? And people who practice hatha yoga are, they want to go beyond the gunas. They don't even want the white part, the white property. They're like, no, we don't want that. So the reason why a bhakti yogi is primarily and predominantly sattvic, or has this white guna, is because, all of their actions are purified because of their devotion and their love for God. That they want to make sacrifices, they want to change themselves, they want to transform their characters. They're like, I'm not going to do this because of you, because I love you. I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. And by devoting their hearts, their minds, and their emotions so much to this Godhead, that ordinary human nature undergoes a great transformation. So you find that many saints are not exceptional hatha yogis. They are not exceptional, they don't stand on their heads for 45 minutes like me, I'm definitely not a bhakti yogi. I mean, I did practice that for a long time, and I kind of had to put a stop on it because things weren't working out practically. I kind of left home for to the outskirts, to hills, and I became a really weird person, very unconventional, and it causes problems. It causes definitely a lot of complications, which these highly advanced bhakti yogis, for example, a friend of mine recently, found Anandayama, a Bengali saint, a great bhakti yogi. She was always in this. If you take a look at her pictures, she was in this ecstatic trance, always tranced out. You can't be like that in ordinary society. It's like you better renounce everything and go off onto the Gangas or to the Himalayas and live that kind of life, So, Bhakti Yogi, they say, is easy. Yes, it is easy because step by step you do, reach that realization of the Godhead. But just like in every other yoga, there comes a certain point where you have to make a jump, And at this point, at this juncture over here, when we're talking about Bhakti Yoga, it's particularly difficult, because there is no assistance in the form of, for example, sort of like in Hatha Yoga, you've got the assistance of mudras and bandhas, and you've got the assistance of pranayam and these breathing practices to calm things down, and to really fortify things, But in Bhakti Yoga, what happens is that the emotions, they just become like a river. They overflow and they flow to the sea and then, merge into the ocean of existence. And the person is basically like bliss out. That, many times these people are not able to function in society as normal people. So that's where you're going to encounter a lot of difficulty. But what you can do, when you practice Bhakti Yoga, for example, there is this incorporation of, the mantras, using mantras basically to, fortify the mind, to kind of bring these emotions under control, to kind of like give them a sense of serenity, because love can make you mad. That's just a fact. Love, crazy in love. He's mad in love. You heard that saying, right? Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, he loved Kali more than any, I would say more than anybody else that I know, given from what I've read about him. And the most unconventional person in that sense, I mean, he was very unconventional, and this shocked Swami Vivekananda, his behaviors. And he couldn't believe that someone like this, who seemed crazy, could have any idea of God, because Vivekananda was a powerful intellectual, he was very skeptical, he wanted reason, he doubted. And until that famous incident in the room where, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, gave him the experience of, Mahasamadhi, that just blew Swami Vivekananda's mind. And that's the power of Bhakti Yoga. Here you have someone like Swami Vivekananda, a mega intellectual, just completely, had his world just turned upside down with this uneducated person who, who seemed crazy, for the most part. That's Bhakti Yoga. That's the power of devotion. And if you really put your heart and soul into worshipping a deity or a particular god, you become one with that god, And, there is this, at this point, I'm gonna try to make a bit of I'm just going to try and talk about something. So, Aurobindo and Vivekananda had, mentioned that when you worship a particular deity, you soon start to take on characteristics of these deities, and you kind of start to look like them, more or less, if you really push it. It doesn't have to be a hard and fast rule. It does not have to be a hard and fast rule. It's just an observation. My brother, for example, is a great devotee of Hanuman, and if you look at his legs are like Hanuman, his physique is like Hanuman, and so I believe in this, the fact that you start to take on characteristics of a particular godhead that you believe in, that you worship, you know. You know, I was a great bhakt of Shiv and Krishna. You know, I certainly wouldn't say that I've got anything in common with them physically or mentally or emotionally. So there is no hard and fast rule, but that's just a general, a peculiar observation, you know. So Ramakrishna Hamsa was a man. They considered him to be a madman. So his family members decided that the only way he is going to get grounded is to get him married off, you know. And so coming back to my point, you know, you do in every yoga, you reach that point, you know, which Aurobindo calls the intermediate zone, and you got to make that jump, right? And that's the point where it's really it's a very precarious place to be in, you know. And so Bhakti Yoga is not a joke. You know, just because you're chanting some mantras chanting mantras falls under mantra yoga, but is also, as I mentioned. So before anybody leaves a comment, you know, mantras are used in Bhakti Yoga as well. Don't tell me that they're not, because that's just not true. And you know, obviously there's the kirtans and the bhajans, which forms, you know, the more important part when it comes to you know, Bhakti Yoga in that sense, you know, rather than the mantras. And so you are kind of, you're kind of on the wrong lane if you think that you're doing Bhakti Yoga right, and you're sort of like, you know, I'm worshipping God, and you know, my character is being transformed, and you know, I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna be all right. You know, you are gonna be fine. You are gonna be all right. You know, as in every yoga, even in Bhakti Yoga, you have to be careful about spiritual ego. You know, because a lot of times, believe it or not, even demons practice the kind of Bhakti Yoga. For example, Ravan was a great bhakt of Shiv. Many of these asurs were, you know, great devotees of gods. You know, gods, especially gods like Shiv, you know, and Kali. But their devotion, you know, gave way to ambition and, you know, to lust and many other vices, you know, and they failed in their sadhana or in their attempt to master their nature and to, you know, grow and to evolve and to become one with this universal spirit and to achieve the ultimate goal of a human being's life, which is spiritual liberation, you know. Material liberation is a good thing. It's a necessity. It's almost sort of like if you are the richest person in the world, we don't know whether, you know, that's enough, whether that's going to give you spiritual liberation. You know, we'll leave that topic for another day. But you know, it's not the same thing. Many people who are spiritually liberated, like these great bhakti yogis, where most of the time they didn't have a lot of money. They found that contradictory to, you know, towards their attempt in reaching God. You know, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa had a great detachment towards money and women. In fact, he kind of detested them both. So I don't know whether it was Swami Vivekananda or another devotee or another disciple of his who decided to test Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and he took a coin and, you know, he put it under the bed where Ramakrishna Paramahamsa always sat, you know, and he started to get into convolutions. He had convolutions, you know, his body started to get all crooked and everything. And he immediately, I don't know what's the exact story, but apparently Ramakrishna Paramahamsa screamed out, "Oh my God, somebody's put a coin underneath me. You know, who's done this?" I think that's how it went, but I'm not really sure. But that's how their nerves, you know, transformed to the point that they just cannot stand such things, that take them away from God and pushes them back into the world, into worldliness, because the spiritual realm and the worldly realm are pretty much at two opposite poles, are poles apart, So basically, that is Bhakti Yoga. It's not the easiest thing on planet Earth, like, just sitting and saying Hare Ram, Hare Krishna. It's this. You're gonna have to really try to understand. You're gonna have to understand that there are many, even people abroad, have given up their modern way of living, have moved into India and have, completely just moved away from materialism and, really pursued this path of spirituality. And sure, they must have started with Bhakti Yoga as well, or incorporated various kinds of yoga. So my point is, Bhakti means devotion. So you have to be devoted at the end of the day. You can't sort of like, it's not sort of like you chant a few mantras, or you sing a few bhajans and that's it, job done. The emotions have to be stirred. There has to be a real emotional connection. There has to be something real, something that is actually felt deep within. And that's when you're on the right path. That's when you're doing Bhakti Yoga in the right way, Great devotees have shed tears, just by one mention of the God that they worship. It's a skeptic or a person who's into rationalism would find that incredibly irrational. That how can a person fall in love with a non-living entity, an imaginary entity? But there is a psychology behind this. There are transformations that people go through when they practice Bhakti Yoga. Okay, and a robber such as Valmiki, who wrote the Ramayana, his character was transformed because he chanted the Ram mantra. Of course, I know there are many pundits out there who want me to talk more about that story, but I'm not. I'm just trying to talk about certain important points, because as a practitioner of yoga and as a teacher, I want to tell you guys what should be important to you if you ever embark on this journey of Bhakti Yoga, for example. I'm not here to do an informational YouTube video. I'm not a YouTuber who's read a book on the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita and all of these things, the Shiv Puran and all of this stuff. And I'm out here, memorized stuff and, just telling you guys and sort of like getting 1 million views and being like, there you go, success. No, I'm here authentic. I'm a yoga teacher, and I teach primarily, I teach Raj Yoga and Hatha Yoga. Okay, so that's the first thing straight off the bat that you should know. And Kundalini Yoga, so basically, there are these various kinds of yoga. You have Bhakti Yoga as well. And Valmiki was a robber, and he went and he met you can read the story. I'm not going to talk about the various demigods and gods. He met a demigod, and this god was a messenger. He's a messenger of the gods in general, and that was his role. So he encounters Valmiki, doing these great penances. I think that's how the story goes. Or I'm not really sure. He just meets this person, this demigod, the messenger of gods, and this person gives him, tells him to think about to meditate on Ram, or gave him the mantra Ram. But apparently, as the story goes, Valmiki, was such a brute of a person, was so uneducated, and didn't have his diction, up to the point where he could actually pronounce these syllables. So he was doing it all wrong. So, the demigod tells him, okay, fine, don't pronounce it that way. I'm going to give you a simpler way to pronounce it. Since your mind is so into sin and into all these vices and all these things, say Mara, okay, or Mar. However you want to pronounce it, there are different ways of pronouncing it. It's like yog. You say yoga or yog, If you write it in Hindi, it's yog, So M-A-R-A was the mantra that was given to him. And this story I read, I don't know, 15 years back or 20 years back when I was a small kid, the story about Valmiki. So I don't know the details. And I just know what's important in that story, which is that this robber, because of his chanting of Mara, Mara, Maram, Ram, it became Ram. So that demigod was very intelligent, kind of understood, phonetics and stuff, and understood how to make this rustic robber, chant a mantra as, elevated as this. And so he just got into a trance just by chanting this mantra and became such a great devotee of Ram that he wrote the legendary Ramayana, And that is Bhakti Yoga. You have to be incredibly devoted even while practicing a particular mantra. You have to be a bhakt of that God or that mantra that you're practicing. It could be anything, it's like if you, let's say you want to become a great singer, you need extreme devotion if you really want to, make it big, you have to be so devoted to the art, In general, you have to be really devoted, and I think that's what it takes. And if you aren't already, talented enough, and you have to really be devoted to your career as a singer, be able to be willing to give up anything for that career, or anything to make it work, and in that sense, you can also be a bhakta, or a devotee to that form of that object, to that thing, and eventually when you're so devoted, you slowly start to, get closer and closer and closer, that yoga happens. For example, if you play the guitar for long enough, and if you're practicing the guitar for long enough, or you're practicing singing, you soon find that you lose your personal, it does happen, there are moments where you forget who you are, your personal sense of identity. And I don't mean this in a negative way. I don't mean by disassociation or depersonalization. I mean through association. You become so merged in that act of singing, in that karma of singing, okay? Or playing the guitar, that you become one with the instrument. The like you read in the Bhagavad Gita, the agent of knowing, the senses, the object and the subject all become one in union in yoga. So that's why I told you there is no difference between Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raj Yoga, Hatha Yoga, Jnana Yoga. You will all eventually reach a point where you're having the same experience. There comes that intermediate zone, It's at the beginning that you see the apparent differences and, the different ways, the differences in the approach towards, yoga. So, the story of Dhruva and Prahlad, for example, is a great story of, Bhakti Yoga, where they basically were such great devotees of Vishnu that they performed severe penances at such a young age, they became legends. There are many stories of these saints, and these sages who were great bhakts. I repeat, like I did in the video that I deleted, that the story of Krishna and gopis, if you really think about it, it is. If you really go into certain scriptures that I'm not going to reveal or talk about right now over here, it's not free information, that you can just take off and, sort of like, oh yes, I was the one who kind of like found it, and take credit. But if you really read into these things, if you really understand Sanskrit, if you really are in touch with the right people, you'll understand that Krishna, who was a king, he was a sage king, a king sage, however you want to put it, and then there were the gopis, so his life has been documented, and his life is basically that of a great king who was also a sage. So it's quite a unique phenomenon, So when he was a young guy, he was a really naughty kid, like most kids are, and he used to go. His favorite thing was butter, Indian butter, which is not the same thing as the butter that we know of nowadays, and there's a certain symbolism behind that act of his. Okay, do the reading. It's all written. It's out there on the internet. Do your own research. I'm not gonna push it too much in this video. And then there are the gopis, or the girls who used to, because I know some of you people are Westerners. So there were the gopis, the people who the girls who used to take care of the cows, the young girls who were given the responsibility of taking care of the cows. And when Krishna used to play his flute, late at night, way past midnight, these girls found it irresistible, the sound. And, they got out of their houses at these, these unholy hours, and started dancing around, supremely enchanted with the sound, and started dancing around him. So they call him the playboy. They call him a playboy. Krishna is also known to be a bit of a playboy. So there are hundreds of interpretations, to this personality called Krishna, and take it as you will. But the more esoteric meaning of his playing the flute is that the bliss that is encountered when you practice, when you go into deep states of ecstasy and yogic meditation, whether it's through bhakti yoga, hatha yoga, whatever kind of yoga, right? That's the ananda, because you have to understand that Krishna is a god of ananda, because this Pradyumna, who was his grandson or his great-grandson, who was an incarnation of Kamdev, the god of love. So that should tell you all about, Krishna and Ananda and bliss and love, So there you go. That sound, that Ananda, that bliss is basically symbolic, and it's esoteric. When you sit in meditation, you feel the Ananda, you feel the bliss. That is the sound of Krishna's melody. He's inviting you to experience that Ananda, So there's a deeper meaning to these things, and the gopis, being the sages or whatnot. Take it as you will. I could be right, I could be wrong. I'm pretty convinced. I think Swami Vivekananda also talked about the symbology of Krishna and the gopis in this way. So you have to pretty much take it up with him as well. So, Bhakti Yoga is a very powerful kind of yoga. There is no way that you can underestimate it and sort of be like, oh, I just need to chant a few mantras, I just need to love a particular god, and I'm just going to go into bliss and be like, oh, it's all flowers and sunlight, Yeah, it's going to be that, but then you're going to have to come back into the world and function as, a normal person. And that's where you're going to have to take a strong decision as to, what is it that you want to do. Because when you practice Bhakti Yoga, you can prevent yourself from, pushing it to the point of, what great yogis do, which is to go into the Himalayas and just give up the world. There are extremes, So what you can do is, because I'm talking from experience as well, is you can take a step back and you can find God in society as well. You can find God in the world as well, as hard and as difficult as it is, as much as it sounds, God in the world. I mean, what is this guy talking about? This is a devil's place. And indeed it is, but there is also God. There are good people. There are people who are transformed. There are pure people. There are these people, And it all depends on faith, You know, like Jesus had great faith and devotion to the Almighty Father. So this Bhakti Yoga, you know, which is practiced so much in India, if you go to India, and this is something not many Indians will realize, not many native Indians will realize until a foreigner tells you, like how some foreigners told me, that when they went to India, they felt such a harmonious atmosphere. It was so harmonious. It was so, they could feel it in the air, you know, a spiritual atmosphere. And that's because people have created that atmosphere through that Bhakti Yoga, because a large amount of people in India practice Bhakti Yoga in some form or another, you know, for the most part. And so it has the power and the capacity to transform society. You know, I'm not trying to brag, because I'm a very balanced person, but I am of the belief that Indians in general tend to be gentle people. You know, they tend to be less violent, I believe, you know. And I think it's partly because of the kind of culture, you know, like there's this whole movement of Bhakti Yoga, which was created by, you know, which was really pushed forward and really gained great momentum by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you know. So if something as simple as Bhakti Yoga can transform society at large, imagine what it can do to the world. And that's the importance of Bhakti Yoga, you know. What I'm going to do is I'm going to end this video over here. I've just given some key points to you know, that I've touched upon, some key points to you know, just elaborate upon, and not really get really specific about Bhakti Yoga and the way you do it and the practice and the methods, you know. That's something good. Is look at other YouTube videos, or you know, read some books and go online and you know, see how that works out for you. I'm just here to kind of like give a general summary of what these yogas are. So this was Bhakti Yoga, okay? And in the next video, I'm going to talk about the next kind of yoga and what it means. What are the few important key points that you know that you need to know about when you're talking about that sort of a yoga. So that is it for me in this video. I'm Shuprothim. I teach yoga, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye for now.